You're not only fighting the world, you're fighting yourself. That quiet voice of self-doubt, the shame that flares up in success, the inner critic that tears you down just when you try to rise, that's your inner opponent. But here's the truth, this enemy within isn't evil. It's a part of you that was shaped to protect, to survive, to make sense of early wounds, and until you learn to listen to it, not run from it, it will keep pulling your life off course. The parts you resist are often the ones that need your attention the most. They hold clues to your story, your healing, and your integration. The goal is not to silence the inner opponent, but to understand it, and ultimately to transform the battle into a conversation that leads to wholeness. Every time you feel resistance rising, whether it's procrastination, anger, fear, or avoidance, something deeper is calling you. Resistance isn't just a random block, it's a compass, pointing directly toward the parts of yourself you've rejected, abandoned, or suppressed. And ironically, what you most resist in yourself is often what you've unconsciously labeled as unacceptable, often from childhood or early social conditioning. These rejected parts are known as shadow selves. They might carry anger you weren't allowed to express, sensitivity that was mocked, ambition that made others uncomfortable, or even joy that was dimmed to avoid envy or punishment. When you feel that inner wall go up, that's not a sign to turn away, it's a call to look closer. The psyche doesn't waste energy. If you're resisting something internally, it means it holds meaning. It touches something raw, personal, and unprocessed. Most people take resistance as a stop sign, but in truth, resistance is a doorway. It's your unconscious trying to protect you from revisiting a memory or identity that felt dangerous or shameful at some earlier point in your life. But now that you're grown, the survival patterns from the past are limiting your present. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of the self that were pushed out of consciousness because they didn't fit our self-image or what our family and culture told us was right. The more we resist these shadow elements, the more power they gain. Why? Because the unconscious doesn't disappear when ignored, it just expresses itself in distorted ways, through sabotage, emotional reactivity, addiction, or compulsive perfectionism. Take a moment to reflect. What traits in others deeply irritate you? What emotions do you quickly shut down? What dreams do you dismiss as not for me? These are often projections of your rejected selves, qualities you once had but were shamed or punished for, so you learn to exile them. But exiled parts don't vanish, they go underground waiting for acknowledgement. Resistance then is not your enemy, it's your roadmap. If you want to evolve, you must move toward the resistance, not away from it. Start by tracking the emotions or patterns that trigger avoidance. Ask yourself, what part of me is trying to speak right now? What might I be afraid to feel, remember, or claim? This process is not about blame, it's about retrieval. You are retrieving your wholeness from the prisons of repression. There's a paradox in personal transformation. The more we try to destroy parts of ourselves, the more fragmented we become. The more we turn toward them with curiosity and compassion, the more integrated and powerful we feel. Resistance is part of the path. It is not the problem. It's an ancient signal from your psyche that something valuable was once buried for safety and is now ready to return. This is not easy work. Resistance can come with intense emotion, rage, grief, fear, or shame. But underneath those reactions is often a younger part of you waiting to be seen. Maybe it's the child who felt too much and was told to be quiet. Maybe it's the rebellious teenager who had dreams but was shut down. Maybe it's the vulnerable part that learned never to ask for help. By listening to these voices rather than suppressing them, you become a more complete human being. Not perfect, but whole. In modern culture, we're taught to overcome resistance with willpower, to push through it. But inner work is not a battle of dominance, it's a dance with what's been forgotten. Resistance becomes your ally when you stop seeing it as the thing to beat, and start seeing it as the voice that's trying to lead you home. Every wave of discomfort is a chance to reclaim a part of yourself that you were told didn't belong. The next time you feel internal resistance, whether in a relationship, a creative pursuit, or a spiritual journey, pause, ask what it's protecting, ask what it's hiding, and most importantly, ask what version of you got left behind in order to survive. That's the one waiting to be welcomed back. You don't need to be fearless, you just need to be willing to trace the resistance back to its root, willing to speak to the rejected selves instead of silencing them, willing to believe that nothing inside you is beyond redemption. When you do this, resistance stops being the barrier, it becomes the bridge. The voice inside your head that tells you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy, it didn't come from nowhere, it was born from pain. The inner critic is not an objective judge, it's a wounded voice, shaped by experiences where you felt unseen, unsafe, or unloved. Long before you had language for it, your psyche began absorbing the subtle and overt messages of rejection from your environment. A disapproving look, a comparison to someone else, a moment of humiliation. These moments planted seeds, and over time those seeds grew into a harsh internal monologue, designed not to empower you, but to protect you by limiting you. The purpose of the inner critic was originally survival. If you could anticipate rejection and self-correct before it happened, maybe you could avoid pain. So your mind built a defense. Don't speak up, you'll embarrass yourself. Stay small, don't be a burden, you'll never be enough, so don't try. These statements may sound cruel, But beneath them is fear, a fear that was valid once when love and acceptance were conditional. But now, in your present, these internalized wounds masquerading as truth are keeping you from growth, intimacy, and freedom. Many people mistake the inner critic for their real self, but it's not. It's an echo of past emotional injuries, internalized so deeply that its voice feels like your own. Often that voice carries the tone or language of parents, teachers, peers, or caretakers. It's not just what was said, but how it made you feel, ashamed, small, wrong. And when those wounds aren't healed, they become your default operating system. You stop trying because what's the point? You overachieve because if I'm perfect, I'll be safe. You hide your truth because if they see the real me, they'll leave. But here's the key. The inner critic is not a villain. It's a part of you that adapted to survive emotional pain, and like all parts of the psyche, it can be transformed, not through suppression, but through compassion and dialogue. Instead of silencing it or trying to drown it out with positivity, ask it, what are you trying to protect me from? You'll be surprised. Beneath the criticism is often a scared child who once believed, if I don't do everything right, I won't be loved. This is where healing begins, not by rejecting the critic but by understanding it. Your inner critic doesn't need to be your enemy. It can become your teacher. When it says you're not good enough, don't believe it, but listen to where that belief started. Was it the time you were publicly shamed? The time you were told to toughen up when all you needed was a hug? These memories aren't just mental, they live in your body, your reactions, your choices. By connecting with them, you don't just silence the critic, you disarm it. This work takes time. Years of internalized shame don't unravel overnight. But each time you pause and respond with curiosity instead of judgment, you loosen the critic's grip. You begin to separate your true self, the one that is inherently worthy, from the wounded part that's been whispering lies to keep you safe. You might still hear the critic from time to time. That's okay. The goal isn't to erase it but to make it one voice among many, not the one in charge. You are not broken for having an inner critic, you are human, and the fact that you can now see it for what it is, a product of old wounds, means you're already on the path to healing. Your real voice is deeper, calmer, wiser. It doesn't shame or belittle. It nudges, it encourages, it forgives. The more you connect with that voice, the more space you create inside yourself for growth, risk, and authenticity. You don't need to fight your critic, you need to understand it. Because once you do, its power begins to fade, and your real self, the one that's been waiting behind the wounds, can finally emerge. Most people believe strength means silencing the parts of themselves that feel weak, insecure, jealous, angry, or afraid. They believe that to be strong they must reject their inner opponent, the part of them that resists, doubts, or criticizes. But this is a misunderstanding of real strength. True strength isn't found in domination of the self, it's found in integration. The parts of you that oppose your progress aren't enemies to be eliminated. They are wounded messengers, misunderstood protectors, and exiled parts of your story. And when you stop fighting them and start listening, you discover something profound. The very parts you've been resisting hold the energy, wisdom, and power you need to move forward. This inner opponent, whether it's your fear of failure, your self-doubt, or your critical voice, developed to serve a purpose. It showed up at some point to keep you safe. Maybe it protected you from disappointment, or helped you cope with emotional neglect, or kept you from risking vulnerability in unsafe environments. It's easy to call this part bad and push it away, but in doing so you create a war inside yourself, and no one wins that war. You only split further from your true self. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your inner opponent is that darkness. It is the shadow that contains all the traits you've denied or been ashamed of. It is your aggression, your neediness, your ambition, your rage, all the things that didn't feel safe to express. But here's the paradox. When you allow yourself to face these parts not with shame but with curiosity, they stop working against you. They stop screaming for attention in destructive ways and begin to integrate into your conscious self. This is the turning point when you realize that the energy you've been using to suppress your inner opponent can now be used to transform it. That anger, it can become fuel for setting boundaries. That jealousy, a signal pointing to your unlived desires. That fear, a compass showing you where growth is waiting. When you befriend the inner opponent, it becomes your ally. Think of it like taming a wild animal. At first it's reactive, defensive, dangerous even, but once you stop chasing it away and instead sit with it, feed it, learn its patterns, it slowly begins to trust you. The same is true of the inner parts you've been fighting. They don't need to be destroyed, they need to be seen, understood, welcomed. This is not weakness. In fact, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, because it's easier to suppress and distract than it is to face your discomfort head-on. It's easier to pretend you're fine than to admit you're at war with yourself. But if you want to be whole, if you want to walk through life with peace and clarity, you must stop dividing yourself. True strength comes from unity, not control. You might be thinking, but what if these parts sabotage me? Here's the truth. They already are when you ignore them. The sabotage doesn't come from their existence, it comes from their rejection. When your fear has no voice, it controls your decisions from the shadows. When your shame isn't named, it bleeds into your relationships. But when you listen, when you give those parts a seat at the table, they calm down. They don't need to hijack your life to be heard. So how do you begin this process? Start by noticing your resistance. When you feel triggered, ask yourself, what part of me feels unsafe right now? What does it believe? Where did that belief come from? Then instead of judging, thank it. Thank your fear for trying to protect you. Thank your critic for keeping you alert. Then ask it, what do you really need from me now? This is how transformation begins, slowly, gently, by turning toward yourself instead of away. You start to feel stronger, not because you've eliminated your flaws, but because you've stopped hiding from them. You carry your complexity with grace, you act with awareness, and most importantly, you stop needing the world to validate your strength because you've already earned it from within. Befriending the opponent is the hero's work. It's not flashy, no one sees it happening, but it is the quiet revolution that changes everything, because once you make peace with the parts you thought you had to destroy, you become something rare, a human being who is whole, integrated, and unshakably strong. The deepest illusion we carry is that healing means getting rid of the parts we don't like about ourselves. We think the goal is to eliminate fear, silence the inner critic, erase jealousy, or destroy anger. But this mindset is rooted in ego, an ego that wants to appear perfect, untouchable, invincible. True transformation doesn't come through elimination, it comes through integration. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting away what's bad in you, it's achieved by understanding, holding, and ultimately weaving those disowned parts into a fuller, more honest self. Every shadowy part within you serves a purpose. That fear you hate, it protected you when you were vulnerable. That anger you suppress, it shows up when your boundaries are being violated. That jealousy, it reveals unacknowledged longing. None of these parts are mistakes, they're responses. Emotional artifacts left behind by real experiences. When you try to eliminate them, you lose access to their wisdom. When you integrate them, they become teachers. Integration is not indulgence. It doesn't mean letting your rage explode or living at the mercy of fear. It means acknowledging those parts exist, then finding a conscious relationship with them. You stop being a puppet controlled by your unconscious drives and become the one who chooses how to respond. That is maturity. That is power. The process of integration begins with self-honesty. You must admit there are parts of you you've been running from. Maybe you pretend to always be kind, so you deny your resentment. Maybe you strive to always be humble, so you ignore your craving for recognition. Maybe you pride yourself on being strong, so you bury your sadness. These patterns don't go away just because you suppress them. They go underground, and from the shadows, they shape your behavior in subtle, damaging ways. Carl Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That statement flips the spiritual journey on its head. Being good often means conforming to external expectations, playing the role you believe will gain approval. But being whole means claiming all of who you are, even the parts that scare or embarrass you. It means saying, I can be gentle and furious, I can be confident and unsure, I can be generous and selfish, and all of it is me. When you try to eliminate your inner contradictions, you create inner division. You split your psyche into acceptable and unacceptable zones. But healing isn't about building higher walls between your traits, it's about dissolving them. It's about sitting in the tension between opposites until you find a deeper truth that holds both. That's what integration does. It holds paradox without collapsing into either side. Think of yourself like a stained glass window. Every fragment, every color, every jagged edge has a place. If you try to remove the dark pieces, the window falls apart. But if you arrange all the pieces together, the light can shine through. That's the power of integration. It doesn't make you flawless.